So the last thing that we did, we started Birkat Torah, and then we talked about the verses from Parshas Nasa, Yivarecha Hashem Yishmerecha, which are the brachas that the Kohanim give us. It would be the bracha that Moshe would give us if he would get to shul on time. And then we recite a Mishnah and we recite a bit of Gemara. Let's have a look at the Mishnah first. Eilu dvarim she'en lehem shiur. There are certain things that have no prescribed measure. That's the way Rabbi Scroll, stop it. That's the way that Rabbi Scroll describes it. No prescribed measure. This is something very interesting because Judaism is a very exact religion, right? The very first Mishnah in Brachot, in the whole of the Talmud is Me'emas HaKohen Kriya Shema Ba'arvis. I need to know exactly when you recite Shema, from when, until when, in the morning, from when. All of a sudden we've got a few things over here that have no prescribed limits, which means there is no minimum and no maximum either, according to the Torah law. What are they? Apeya, Abikurin V'Arayon, Ugemilas Chasadim V'Talmud Torah. So let's look and see what they are. Hapeya is when you've got a field and you have to leave a little bit of the field, a corner of the field has to be left unharvested so that the poor people can come in and they can take from there freely.
I thought it had to be 10%.
Oh, so we don't know because the Torah itself doesn't say how much it's supposed to be. The rabbis come along and they quantify it for us. But Lamaisa, if you want to fulfill the mitzvah according to the Torah law, you could leave just one stalk, right, in your field, or you could leave the whole field, whatever you want, because there's no measure whatsoever. The next thing is Bikurim. Right now, they're agricultural ideas. What is Bikurim? Bikurim is the first fruits. Now, the Torah says that you need to bring your first fruits to Jerusalem, to the temple, right? And they have a holy status. And in fact, there was a very beautiful ceremony that the farmers would come, and everybody in Yerushalayim would come out to meet the farmers as they brought their fruits into Jerusalem, into the old city, and then they would bring them to the temple, and they would give them to the Kohanim, and they were brought on special platters. I mean, it was a very special mitzvah. What's interesting is, it says you should bring the first fruits, but it doesn't say how do you define what the first fruits are. What does that mean? Does it mean the first fruits on one tree? Does it mean the first fruit on each tree that you've got? Right? It's difficult to know. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, doesn't tell us, doesn't give it a hint one way or the other what it's supposed to be. Along came the rabbis, and they told us what we're supposed to do. Just to take off a moment, because I think it's a very beautiful idea. The Torah says like this, when you're growing, you've got an orchard, and as you see the fruits beginning to bud on your tree, you then have to come and you have to take a red thread and tie it onto the branch, so that you know that this fruit over here is the one that's going to go to Jerusalem. Why would that be? Because a farmer works very, very hard in order to bring his fruit into being, which means he's got to nurture he has to nurture his trees, he's got to irrigate them, he's got to look after them, he's got to make sure that they're cut down properly before the winter begins, and then they've got to start being treated carefully after that once the spring begins, right? And all of that is being done, and all of a sudden, you can imagine the excitement when all of a sudden the fruits start to grow. You've got little buds over there of baby fruit that's going to turn into beautiful, luscious fruit, and you've got to tie a little thing around it to know that this is the one that's going to Jerusalem. And then when it's ready, what do? Instead of taking the fruit and making a little party for your family, because these really are, if you'll excuse the pun, but it really is the fruits of your labor, you're going to bring them to Jerusalem instead. The idea is that we should know that whatever we have comes from God, right? All of our successes, and maybe all of our non-successes as well, everything comes from God, and we have to remember that's something that we have to keep in mind the whole time. Bikurim, what is the Rayon? The Rayon is a Korban Riyah. It is a sacrifice that was brought when a person came to Jerusalem and he went to the temple. So he brought a sacrifice together with him. How many times did you bring that sacrifice? Just depending on how many times you came to Jerusalem, which means 3 times a year if you came for the 3 foot festivals. If you come more than that, you would bring more often. And then, Gemilas Chasadim. What's Gemilas Chasadim? Kind deeds. There is no prescribed limit to kind deeds, which means that you could spend all day. What are you shaking your head about? So that's it. You could spend all day doing kind deeds, and you're busy shaking your head.
I'm busy yawning.
it would be a kind deed if you covered your mouth when you yawned. And then you could do the kind deeds all day long. Look at that. What, I understand. What's your problem? What are you upset about now? You don't want to do kind deeds.
No, not the kind deeds. The sacrifice. Like, wouldn't there be rotting animals everywhere if all these people are bringing all these dead animals to?
No. First of all, you don't bring a dead animal. You bring a live animal
when you get there.
only when you get to the temple when it's ready to be sacrificed.
So there's just like hundreds of animals.
You should
live
know.
Animals smell bad too, and they,
Hey, not just live animals.
That's why they have incense.
I got the joke.
Thank you. I don't know. He's,
You
huh?
repeat it.
No, I don't want to trouble you.
No.
I'm involved in Gemilas Chasadim right now.
Okay.
Kind deeds. I'm not. It's
kind
true.
deeds
You know what? You know what's fascinating about the temple? If I ask you to think about the temple, most people, when you think about the temple, you'll come up with some kind of a very fluffy, very sort of spiritual environment, right?
Fluffy. What do you mean by fluffy?
Like,
You know, fluffy.
Fluffy?
Yeah, fluffy.
Like
Look,
a cloud?
yeah. Look, it's like Kabbalistic. If you don't understand, don't expect me to explain it to you.
You're gonna tell the doctor comment any minute.
The temple was a enormous slaughterhouse. That's really what it was. There were a constant stream of animals being brought through to the point where the temple had a supply of animals it kept for itself, and if there weren't people bringing sacrifices, they would use those to sacrifice instead, which means that the function of the temple was to offer up sacrifices to God.
Can anybody give it, or just the Kohanim?
Anyone can bring a sacrifice. The only person who can actually make the sacrifice is a Kohen.
But then why in this week's parasha, in this week's coming up parasha, does it talk about how everybody has to give a different kind of offering?
Yeah, because the idea is like this: everybody is supposed to bring sacrifices.
Well, why does the poor person not get the same mitzvah as the rich person?
It does. In fact, according to the Gemara, the poor person even though the poor person brings a smaller sacrifice, he gets more reward than the rich person does, because it goes in ratio with what you've got, which means that even though you're bringing a smaller physical sacrifice, oh no, I guess, pun intended, but the sacrifice required to bring that is greater than somebody who's bringing a great big bull. Anyway, so it's interesting that this incredibly spiritual place called the temple was it really was an enormous slaughterhouse. There was a lot of barbecuing going on, a lot of blood. It says we're coming up to Pesach. It says on Erev Pesach, the Gemara describes what was going on Erev Pesach, right, with the Paschal lamb that was being brought by everybody and being slaughtered over there, and the amount of blood that was in the forecourt where the slaughtering was taking place was, according to one opinion, it came up to the ankles of the Kohanim. According to another opinion, it came up to their knees. Right now, it could just be that some of them were very short, so there's no contradiction between the two. That is a possibility. But
would you bring an offering on, for example, Shavuot, when you're supposed to eat meat?
You would not bring. Personal offerings weren't brought on Yom Tov, but there was a very special offering that was brought on Shavuot called the Shtei Alechem, which was bread, actually. But having said that, there were communal offerings that were offered up, which were animals.
No, but what would they do with the offerings? Who would eat the offerings?
Eat, because it's not an obligation to eat milk on Shavuot. It's a custom.
No, but who would eat the offerings?
The Kohanim. What happened was like this: that more often than not, if you brought an offering, right? Let's say for whatever the reason you had to bring an offering to the temple. Normally what would happen is that some of it would be burnt up on the altar, some of it would be given to the Kohanim, and some of it you would eat. Occasionally, the person who brought the offering was not included, and some of it was burnt up on the altar, and some of it was given to the Kohanim. On very rare occasions, what was known as a korban oila, it was completely burnt up on the altar, and nothing was given out from it.
Why would you bring an offering in the first place? What's the reason behind it?
I mean, the most basic reason for bringing an offering is because somebody sinned, right? What's called a korban chatat is for for nearly all sins that a person would do, they would have to bring an offering.
If you've done a very bad sin, you'll get a korban oila, potentially.
No. If you do a bad sin, if one does a bad sin, they will always bring a korban chatas. A korban oila, interestingly enough, is a korban that was brought voluntarily, which means you wake up one morning, well, maybe not in your case, but you get up one afternoon, and you're just overwhelmed with this desire to to come to Jerusalem and to bring an offering, a sacrifice to God. That kind of an offering is something which is offered up in its entirety to God. That's what's called a korban oila.
Korban oil is only eaten by the Kohen?
Wasn't eaten by anybody.
Oh, that's burnt.
That's completely burnt up. What other things would you bring a korban for? You bring a korban, what's called a korban toda, right, which is a thanksgiving offering, which means, for example, you've been in a case of danger, you've been in a place of danger, and you, Baruch Hashem, you came out of it okay. So you would bring some kind of a korban to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what you've done. Again, different korbanos for different things. The Kohanim were offering up korbanos, they were offering up sacrifices through the day. In the morning there were special sacrifices, in the afternoon, in the evening, whatever. Anyway, Gemilas Chasadim, there is no limit to the amount of kind deeds that you can do. And Talmud Torah, interestingly enough, how much Torah do you need to learn? Well, there's no minimal amount and there's no maximal amount, which means that whatever you can learn, that's what you should do, which means that if you're sitting in yeshiva like you people are and, plumbing the depths of your spiritual identities, then you should be learning, probably between 18 and 23 hours of Torah a day. If somebody's got a job, so let's say they've got, they've got an hour and a half free within their day, so they should learn Torah for an hour and a half during the day. No one's going to come along and say you've got to be learning that amount of Torah per day. Right? It goes according to you, and it goes according to your specific timetable, what it is that you are capable of doing. I know somebody, a dentist, who learns in between patients, which I think that's pretty neat. He's always got a sefer, he's always got a book in front of him, and I don't know what that is. How long does it take? Like 90 minutes, to swap over patients going in and coming out, but he's always got a sefer in front of him, and as soon as the patient begins to walk out of the room, he's already learning a little bit more until the next patient comes in. I think that's kind of sweet. I think it's very impressive. Looking around the room, I'm not convinced anyone agrees with me, so we'll just move on to the next thing instead. Thank you. The next thing is a Gemara in Shabbos. It's a very interesting Gemara. It says, there are certain things that you will get. It's a win-win situation. When you do these mitzvahs, you will get reward in this world and you'll get reward in the world to come as well. Right? What's the big chiddush? What's the big novelty over here? Because normally, how do things work? You have in the spiritual bank, you've got a deposit account and you've got a checking account. And you're forever placing merit inside of your deposit account for all of the wonderful deeds that you're doing. I'm sorry. It's just some kind of a nervous tick I have. So you're always accruing lots and lots of merit for the wonderful deeds that you're doing. However, in order to be able to exist down here in the physical world, it could be from time to time you need to make transfers from the deposit account, your spiritual deposit account, into your more physical deposit, your checking account, just in order to be able to live, to get through life over here. Of course, it's not the end of the world because you're always accruing more credit and more merits through the actions that you're doing. However, the Gemara says that there are certain things that we do that you cannot lose, which means that not only do you get the reward in the world to come for what you're doing, but you'll get reward in this world as well. Now, without looking at the list, which I imagine most people didn't do, Bernie, stop it. Without looking at the list, it's the only way I can get Bernie to actually follow. Is I say, don't look, that all of a sudden his eyes are like drawn. It's interesting, it's called reverse psychology.
Is that a new word?
What, reverse or psychology? Which one? That's two words. Which?
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. You pick.
Neither of them are new words.
Every yeshiva needs a rebel.
And you have selflessly taken on the mantle. Super rebel, that's what they call him. If I were to ask you, without looking at the list over here, what do you imagine? What kind of mitzvahs do you imagine will get you, reward in the world to come and reward in this world as well, right?
Cheater. Honor due to father and mother. Acts of kindness. Early
Saving a
attendance
person's life.
on the house of study and more.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is my mistake. I thought we were learning the brachas, but apparently this is remedial reading over here. You did very well.
Thank you.
We're very proud of you. Good. You put a little gold star on the attendance register. I think if I were to ask you which mitzvahs do you think give you double reward here and there, so most of us would come up with a list that are pretty frum, I would have thought. So maybe like keeping Yom Kippur, for example, or whatever, Shabbat, keeping kosher, that kind of stuff, right? Take a look at the list over here. We'll see the list is very revealing because the list is almost entirely centered around what are called the mitzvahs of Ben Adam lechavero, how we're going to interact with each other. Right, so let's have a look and see. Kibud av v'em, honoring your parents. Gemilas chasodim, doing kind deeds. V'hashkamas beis hamedrash shachris v'aris, going to shul for shachris and in the morning and in the evening. we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's part of the Arvid is really the afternoon, like twilight time. Hachnasas orachim, having guests. Bikor cholim, visiting the sick. Hachnasas kala, helping brides to get married. Levayas hameis, escorting the dead.
What happens if you help grooms rather than brides?
It's okay. We can talk about this.
No, I'm saying...
No, it's negotiable. It's okay.
Well, they use very gendered language, and I wanted to see if it applies both sides.
It's interesting. The mitzvah, the way that the mitzvah is described in halacha is it's hachnasas kala, even though it refers to everything, getting somebody married, right? So, if you've got a chatan, right, a groom who doesn't have the wherewithal to get married, for sure you can help him out. It's part of the same mitzvah. Why is it called hachnasas kala? That's an interesting question. Why kala and not chosan?
Because she needs a dress, and that's more important for her to go to the...
No, I mean, it could be. If the couple's in San Francisco, so he probably needs a dress as well, I would have thought. No?
Yeah, but the emphasis on Musa's collar, when people give it...
It could be. I mean, it could be that it's coming down to the fact that certainly in the olden days, the idea of giving a dowry, right, was something which was the onus was on the bride's parents, right? And you're right, getting them ready. There's more to get ready. For goodness' sake, brides they need all kind.
Just the counting of personal belongings.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, women in general, they seem to accumulate huge amounts of personal belongings. That's not my personal experience, of course. I hope my wife's not listening to this. But so I've heard anyway that that's what they do. I think it possibly because there's more to get. Right, so it's not just what you need to get for the wedding, but you need also, furnishing and bedding and all that. Stop looking at me like that, and all that kind of stuff.
Well,
now,
wouldn't the men need the furnishing and bedding too?
Yeah, but it was a custom in the olden days for the kala to supply it. Mm. Nowadays they just manage without. Take their parents or something. Anyway, Ian, right, escorting the dead. Ian tefillah, which is understanding prayer. Hava shalom ben adam lechaveiro, and bringing peace between two people, right, when they've fallen out with each other. And Talmud Torah keneged kulam, and the learning of Torah is equal to all of these things. I guess we had to be from at some point, right? Now, first of all, you should know that in the original list that exists inside of the Gemara, the two from ones are not there, which means that getting up to go and daven for in the morning and the evening and understanding tefillah are not there. The list is purely a list that deals with our ben adam lechavero, how we interact with each other. Yeah.
Going back to the whole idea about learning Torah or something like that, what is considered as Torah?
Good question.
For example, is Musa considered as Torah?
Oh yeah, for sure. Torah is very broadly defined, right? Which means it could be reading verses out of the Torah itself, all the way through to learning a sefer that is Torah related. So, for example, you want to know if it's okay to learn Musa? Yeah, for sure. Musa is works that are supposed to make us into better people. Apparently, takes a long time until it kicks in. But
what about applying natural phenomenon as Torah?
What?
Applying natural.
What do you mean applying natural phenomena as Torah? What does that mean?
I'm gonna try to say it in a way that makes sense. the
Please-
rabbi who explained
please
this
do.
to me much smarter than me. But
No, it's just a veneer. Don't worry.
no, my intelligence is veneer.
So says.
But there's a story in the Talmud or something like that about a guy studying Torah, looking up at a tree, and then stopped studying Torah. And
Yeah, it's a
the-
Mishnah.
Right. And the way that the rabbi explained to me, and I guess this comes from Radek, is that his issue wasn't that he saw the tree, but that he saw the tree and didn't see the Torah was in the tree, and stopped studying Torah to study the tree rather than studying the tree as Torah.
What? Here, look. Let's learn the Mishnah. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says like this: that somebody who's learning, right? Somebody's learning Torah, and they're walking on the way, and they look up and they see this beautiful tree, and they say, "Ma no ilon zeh." How beautiful is this tree? So the Mishnah says, "Ki'ilu mischayev benafsho." It's as if he needs to give up his life for what he's just done. So the Meiri, one of the classic commentaries in the Talmud, explains like this, and I'm not sure if maybe this is what the rabbi was referring to, but he says like this: there is a concept called niflaot haboreh. Niflaot haboreh is to look at the world and to see God. Right? The world is a very beautiful place. Maybe not right in here, right now, but in general, in theory, the world is a very beautiful place, right? You just have to look and see the greenery. It's impossible. It's impossible to miss, right? The world is a very beautiful place, and the world is there for us to be able to find Hashem through nature. There's a very beautiful story they tell. The Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, who lived in Germany, in Frankfurt, he once asked to be taken to the Alps, and they took him to the Alps. Very out of character. He wasn't renowned for going on Tiolim particularly, but so they took him to the Alps, and he looked. And after a while, I don't know, half an hour, whatever it was, 2 hours, he asked to be taken back again. So on the way back, one of his students says to him, "Rebbe, why did we do that?" So Rav Hirsch said, because when I get upstairs at the age of 120, God is going to say to me, "Shamshon, did you look at my Alps? Did you go and admire my Alps? What did you think of them?" And I want to be able to tell him, Hashem, they were beautiful. Which means that the physical world is here for us to appreciate, and it's here for us to recognize the fingerprints of God. However, says the Meiri, right, explaining the Mishnah, that the focus needs to be on Torah. So when a person's learning Torah and he stops to admire a tree, he's lessening off his connection, right? He's doing something which is stronger, doing something more direct, and all of a sudden he's stopping that to do something which is less direct, and that's not something which is recommended.
The rabbi who introduced me to this story said that's pretty much the traditional one, but the source he was looking at, like I said, I think it might have been Radek, I could be wrong, gave an alternate interpretation which would allow for Torah learning to come from that experiencing of the natural godliness, or whatever you want to.
Well, okay, maybe.
Isn't that how Abraham came to Judaism?
Avram Avinu looked at everything, right, and didn't find more of God in any one part of nature than any other, and that's what drew him towards God. Rabbi Akiva, right, before he became Rabbi Akiva, before he knew anything, watched the drips dropping into the stone and realized that it made a little indentation in the stone, and he learned tremendous lessons through nature, right? But again, I'm not 100% sure if what you're being told is that you can learn by looking at a tree that has the same. Is that what he's trying to say? That it has the same power as learning Torah? I don't think so.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the practical application of the law cannot go into effect unless you experience the world. So you can learn about the laws all day, but you're not really... good. Oh, we're going to get to that. You know what? Hold on to that. Oh, okay.
Good, very good. No, it's very important. It's a very important lesson. It really is. Hold on a second, right? Okay, so we've got a bunch of things over here that are telling us to be good people, right? And at the end it says, V'talmud Torah keneged kulam. What?
Don't want to be a good person.
No, I know you don't, but you have to be.
Why?
It's non-negotiable, right? Torah is equivalent to everything.
Combined.
Everything combined, all of these
Forget
wonderful
the rest
things,
from
right?
Torah.
So you should know, when I was a teenager, many years ago, when I was a teenager, I had a lot of problems with this. It bothered me. Really, it bothered me.
Just for this.
Because,
Just for that. No, really.
amongst other things, right? I mean, for now, this is what we're talking about right now, so this is what bothered me. But it bothered me. Why did it bother me? I think for a very simple reason that really, if it should bother you as well. We all know people who are good people, right? They're good, they're sincere, they're kind, they're the kind of people you can rely upon, right? They're not frum, they're not religious, that's all. And unfortunately, there are people out there who are super deluxe religious, and they have the most incredible knowledge, they're the most incredible scholars, and yet they're A1A stinkers. They won't help you out. They'll never do anything for you, right? You can't rely on them. They don't know how to behave, right? So if I were to ask you, who would you prefer to spend time with, right?
Second.
I mean, the answer is obvious, right? Except for English people, the answer is obvious. For sure, you want to spend time with people who are nice and who are kind and who are gentle and who are supportive, right? And so fine, they're not orthodox, but at least you're spending, you're using your time well. You're spending your time with people that you'd like to spend your time with. I was bothered because the Gemara says that the Gemara says at the end of this, Talmud Torah keneged kulam. That learning Torah is the equivalent of all of these wonderful things together. Look at the list; it's a beautiful list, right?
Even if I learn Torah and have no respect for my parents, I'm not a good person and everything like that, then it's okay because I've learned Torah.
I don't know. That's what it seems to say, right?
Yeah.
That was exactly
Wouldn't
my
that
problem.
Not be learning Torah though.
Oh, so listen, right? I went to my Rebbe in London, and I said to him, "It bothers me. I don't. How can we say this?" So he told me something very fundamental. He says like this: the Torah is something which is supposed to turn you into a better person. Most people are not inherently selfless. Most people are inherently selfish, right? Not shellfish, selfish, right? Most people are inherently selfish. How do I overcome my feelings of being selfish, of thinking only of myself? So if you learn Torah, what do you have? The Torah is going to teach you how to become a better person. Yehip Chat. The Torah is a manual which teaches you how to become a better person. Whether you apply it or not, that's dependent upon you. But the more Torah you learn, in theory, the better a person you're supposed to become. So listen carefully to what he said. A person who's intrinsically a good person, one of these few in the minority, people who are inherently good. It's fabulous that they're inherently good. It's fabulous that they live good lives, but that's not necessarily going to draw them closer to God. Whereas somebody who's not inherently good and understands that they have to work on themselves to become better will learn Torah, which will give them both a relationship with God and a relationship with their fellow man as well. And then he said, listen to what he said. This has stuck in my mind for decades. Listen. The Talmud Torah keneged kulam, the learning of Torah is equivalent of all of these things, because if you learn Torah, you'll have them both, right? Because now I know how to be a better person, I know how to honor my parents, and I know how to visit the sick, and I know how to do all of these things, and I'll have the Torah knowledge as well. And then he said that somebody who learns Torah and does not become a better person, every single word of Torah that they've learned is flawed. Which means the function of Torah is to become a better person. If I'm not becoming a better person, then what does that mean? That I'm not doing it properly. You hear? That's pretty powerful, that really is. But what?
My question is, if someone does all these things but doesn't learn Torah, does that mean that they could eventually at some point in time have a greater connection with God? Without
learning Torah?
Yeah, I mean like say for like a secular Jew, if they did all these things,
yeah,
okay, and they managed to get a good connection to God, but they never learned any Torah.
Yeah.
almost any Torah. Is that good or?
Certainly it's greater than not doing it. That's for sure. No one can take away from the enormity of what they're doing.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
Right?
are
It
they
says
gonna-
it's equivalent.
No, I'm
so
saying
it's
like
just as good.
no. Talmud Torah is the equivalent. It doesn't say the other way round. No, it's
But-
not saying
but
no,
if
no, no.
equals
It's not.
B, then B must equal A.
It's
No,
Like
not over here. No,
something
no, 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 no,
That's
no,
how
no,
math
no,
No,
no.
no, 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 no.
It's not A equals B. That's not pshat over here. What it's saying is that if you B is a Talmud Torah, right? If you have B, then you'll reach A. If you have A, you won't necessarily reach B, which means that if you have B and you reach A, you've got A and B. Whereas if you stay in the realms of A and you don't move into B, then you have A, which is an enormous accomplishment. Don't misunderstand me. Rabbi say, being good is good. I'm telling you, that's what I heard from my rabbis. I've got no idea myself, but I'm telling you, right? Being good is good. But it doesn't necessarily draw you into the realms of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Will it give you a relationship with Hashem if you're doing all of these mitzvahs because that's what Hashem wants you to do? Then for sure you're building up your relationship, but not in the way that you could build it up if you were to learn Torah as well. Yes.
Two things. Firstly, as much as I love that, I love the idea. I have two issues with it.
Yes.
Firstly, you've got to find the medium between Torah and daily life. If I learn Torah all day and then I come back home and I don't have any respect for my parents.
Yes.
Yes, it's making me a better person in theory, but in reality,
No,
I
it's
actually
not,
become
right?
better. And
No.
also the second
Yeah, but hold on. Let me just answer the question.
Yeah.
That's what my Rebbe said. That means that what's going on? It means that every word of Torah being learnt is flawed because I haven't turned it into something practical.
So how do you turn into something practical? How do you turn Torah into practicality?
By here.
How do you turn
Here.
Torah into
Going over
practicality?
Here.
your parents.
Because the Gemara here, look, what's the idea? The Gemara is telling you that you have to honor your parents, right? So the Gemara is telling you how you're supposed to honor your parents. In the Shulchan Aruch and the Code of Jewish Law, it tells you what you need to do. And then I come home. I spent all day in the base of Medrash learning about honoring parents, and then I come home and I argue with my parents.
I
What
thought
did I
that
do?
Honoring parents was just supposed to mean you're not denying that they are your parents.
No, it's far, far more than that.
I think I have a.
It's far, far more than that. And you've noticed that there's no mitzvah for parents to honor their children, which they can deny that the child is their child, but you can't deny that they're your
Also-
parents. Yeah. Although, wait a minute, maybe you're not honoring your parents if they say that you're not their kid anymore, and you say that you are.
Also, the other thing that I had a problem with
Kasha.
the other thing I had a problem with was what you said.
You said that without moving your lips.
Literally
Yeah.
right before.
Yes.
With the whole thing about Torah brings you closer to God.
Yes.
Prayer does.
Everything does. The truth is like this. Prayer is included inside of the list over here. You're right. Prayer is the ability for me to communicate with God in a very direct fashion. Right? Torah is God's ability to communicate with me. Think about it. Yeah.
Right, I remember I heard a rabbi once say Torah, the word Torah means instruction.
Yes.
So if you, I'm assuming like, this could maybe clarify things, if you learn instructions, it's to do.
For sure.
So what learning Torah is if it's a blueprint of life, then if you should do it, and therefore that.
Good. Very good. Which means in order to be able to do it, you've got to know what you need to do. Right?
Right.
And that means learning Torah. Torah is a method of teaching you how to do things. Did you? Yeah.
When you say pray, does it have to be the prayers coming from this?
Not
book?
necessarily.
Because there's a lot of prayers in here that I read them because they're there, but I don't really mean them when I say them.
Yeah. I think we all suffer from that in one form or another. A lot of prayer is recited with lip service, right? Because it's there, so we
Right.
say it.
Well, there's that where you're not really focused, you're just going through the motions. But what I mean more so is like there's prayers in here that even if I sincerely read them, I wouldn't mean them. Like I don't wish for that particular segment, like for the banishment of wanton sinners and for the bloody death of people that transgress the rules
Oh,
of
that's
God.
only because that's your entire social circle. That's
Perhaps. I mean that might be part of it.
Yeah, I
but
find the one about women to be a bit off-putting.
which one?
The one in the morning blessings.
Oh, we'll
where
get to
you'll-
it. We'll talk about it.
I'm cool with that one. I just, I don't want the wicked ones to be, banished
Good.
immediately.
You know what?
Like,
Good.
I wish the parents had and may they find their way to Hashem rather than
It's interesting. The commentaries ask the same question that you're asking as well, and the commentaries actually bring an interesting story from somebody called Rabbi Meir and Bruria, right? That there were some people that were bothering Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was the leader of the generation, and there were some people like a bunch of hooligans that were bothering him, thugs, and he davened that they should.
hooligans?
No, not that bad.
Okay.
They're beyond the pale
Manchester
already.
United types,
Whatever,
Anyway, go ahead, son.
So he davened that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should kill them all. And his wife, Bruria, comes to him and says to him, why are you davening for that? Daven that they should return back to where they're supposed to be. And that's what he did, and that's what happened. And so the Gemara asks, how come over here, for example, in the Amida, we have all the Moshinim, right? That get rid of these guys. So the Mefarshim, the commentaries explain that these people that are being referred to over here in the Amida are people who have done the most incredible damage to the Jewish people, and they're beyond the pale already. So there's a little lesson over here for us, is that it is possible to be so wicked that a person crosses over the threshold and doesn't have access to divine mercy anymore. Which means under normal circumstances we should be davening that everybody should return back to where they're supposed to be, and to build up a relationship with God, and to be able to and to want to have a relationship with God. That's really what we should be praying for. But every now and then we're going to run into a situation where we're beyond that already. Yeah.
I can't remember if
So don't.
discussing this with you or a different rabbi here, but
There are other rabbis.
But even in the case of that extreme, isn't it possible for somebody to repent, turn shuva, or whatever? For example, what I was discussing was, I can't remember who. If someone who was Amalek were to convert to Judaism, we consider Amalek, the Hitler of Hitlers, the Haman of Haman, yada. But if there's a case where even someone on that extreme is capable of converting to Judaism, doesn't that mean, and doing good and blah blah blah, doesn't mean that anyone could, in theory, be redeemed?
Again, it's interesting. Anybody, we spoke about this before Purim, right? That Amalek is not a genealogy; it's an ideology, which means that anyone can subscribe to become an Amalekite. Hitler had no direct connection to Haman, not genealogically, right? But he was definitely the spiritual heir of Haman. There's no doubt about that whatsoever, right?
Haman himself was descended from Amalek. Huh?
Haman was a direct descendant of Agag, who was a direct descendant of Amalek. Amalek was the grandson of Esau, right? The original Amalek. So what's the pshat? If you've got somebody who is an ideological subscriber to Amalek, then that's somebody who's crossed over the threshold. If you've got somebody who belongs to an Amalekite family, right, through his genealogy, that's where he comes from, but he shares no connection with what Amalek stands for, then that's not that he doesn't have a din, he doesn't have a classification of being Amalek like the other person does, even though he's not Amalekite.
So which one are we supposed to kill? The ideology?
The ideology, for sure.
But it says that aren't you supposed to even kill the children? And the
Yeah.
babies
So we spoke about this last week. The Chassam Sofer says like this, most incredible thing. The Chassam Sofer says one of the great Jewish leaders in Hungary, about whatever, I can't remember, 180 years ago, 150 years ago, something like that. He writes like this. He says that the milchama, the fight against Amalek, is a fight within ourselves to uproot the Yetzer Hara. Amalek is a physical manifestation of our relationship to God. The more connected we are, the less power Amalek has. If we want to eradicate Amalek entirely, then we have to be completely connected to God. The minute we're completely connected to God, there'll be no Amalek. There'll be no men, there'll be no women, there'll be no children. There'll be nothing. Will there still be Amalekite people that can trace their roots back into the Amalekite nation? Why not? That's not the issue over here. Right? The issue over here is our relationship with God, which means we're not talking over here about a physical battle. He brings all kinds of proofs to what he's saying, but we're not talking about a physical battle over here. We're talking about a spiritual battle, and that's something which really, I have no doubt, it's 100% accurate. Which is the more connected we, the Jewish nation, are to God, the greater is our ability to fight off the power that is Amalek. So now we know, right? Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam doesn't mean that the more Torah you learn, but you don't apply, is worth all of these things, but it's got to be applied, which means that you're going to come out of this, it's a double whammy, right? You're going to come out with both the Torah that you've learned and with all the good deeds that you're learning how to do. You hear what's going on over here? Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam means that we got to learn Torah in order to become better people. If we do that, we've hit the jackpot. We're going to get reward for what we've done, and we're going to get reward in this world and reward in the next world as well. Hold on, one last idea. It's the most incredible thing. There was a very, very famous, brilliant rabbi called Rav Chaim Kreiswert, who was the chief rabbi of Antwerp after the Second World War. And he was diagnosed with a disease that the doctors didn't give him very much hope to survive. So he came to Israel, and he wanted to get a blessing from somebody called Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, who was known as the Stipler Gaon. He lived in Bnei Brak, Rav Chaim Kanievsky's father. So he wanted to get a blessing for him. So he came and he told him, and Rav Chaim and the Stipler, instead of giving him a bracha, he opened up the Siddur, and he points to this little thing that we just learned together, and he says, "Here, read it through. What's wrong with this?" Well, he read it through. Didn't know. You have to understand, Rav Chaim Kreiswert was beyond. He was off the charts brilliant. So he's reading it through, doesn't know. So the Stipler says, "Look, listen to the order: Kibbud Av V'Eim, honoring your parents. Gemilas Chasodim, doing kind deeds. Hachnosas Orchim, having guests. Bikor Cholim, visiting the sick. Hachnosas Kala, making sure that brides can get married. Ulavayas Hameis, and escorting the dead." Said the Stipler to Rav Chaim Kreiswert, "You should know, the order's wrong. No, normally people go into hospital, and very often from the hospital, you then take them to be buried. Why doesn't it say, first of all, Bikor Cholim, then Levayas Hameis, and then you could talk about marrying off the brides?" So he explained that somebody who gets involved in Hachnasas Kala of marrying off brides pushes away the Levayas Hameis. He pushes off the escorting the dead. What's he telling him? He's telling him here, they've told you that you can't survive. He says, I'm giving you a way to be able to survive. Rav Chaim Kreiswert took upon himself to marry off orphaned children. And the truth is that he raised millions and millions of dollars, and he traveled the entire world in order to be able to make sure that the orphans had a proper wedding, and he would rent for them apartments afterwards, and he would furnish the apartments afterwards. And all of this he did after having been diagnosed, after the sniper told him what he told him. He lived for another 22 years. An extra 22 years, even though the doctors told him he wasn't going to. He lived for an extra 22 years just from what? From one little insight into the order of something. The order's a little bit out of sync. It needs to be understood because nothing is random inside of Judaism, and that's what the Stipler learned from this, and that's what kept Rav Chaim Kreiswert alive for another 22 years, yeah.
If I'm a Kohen, how can I escort the dead?
Well, you can't properly. However, there are in most cemeteries, they've got a system set up. I don't know if you've ever paid any attention. I don't know how much time you spend in cemeteries normally. Okay, it's a shame. Just go the once, much later on, right? But in many cemeteries, they've got a system. They've got a system set up with poles and wires, a little bit like an Eruv, right? That allows the Kohanim to go on certain paths and not on other paths. Now, what does it mean, Levayas Hameis? What does it mean to escort the dead? It means to walk 4 amot, which is really not very much, about 2 meters. To walk 4 amot in a funeral procession, right? So if you stay far enough away, you can perform the mitzvah like that.
Can I, let's say, comfort the family that lost?
Yeah, for sure. You mean
Is
go
that-
go,
is that
go
would be
to a
as fun
shiva.
as that?
That's a different mitzvah
Shiva.
altogether. Like Nichum Avelim is a mitzvah of comforting the mourners, and that's something that you go to the house, or you can do it over the telephone, and you can perform the mitzvah like that. Escorting the dead is literally like it sounds like escorting the dead, which means walking 4 amot together with the dead body. I mean, the dead body is not walking. You know what I mean?
Zombies.
I'm not respecting the dead.
Good. Okay, we're going to stop over here in Mitzvah Hashem. We finished Birkat HaTorah. In Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow, we'll start... Oh, no, we haven't finished. We got Elokai Shamash and Asata. We'll do that. And then we'll start Birkat HaShachar. And we'll have a look at that little bracha that bothers you.
The Isha.
But doesn't bother other people, apparently.